Welcome to this latest episode of EY Parthenon Geostrategy in Action. Thank you very much for joining. This is a continuation of our series exploring how the geostrategic environment is impacting some of the most critical business sectors. And I'm very pleased to be here with my colleague today, Ranu Carroll, who is the EY Parthenon Life Sciences leader at EY Parthenon, to discuss how the industry is being impacted and how leading experts are navigating this uncertain world. I'm Adam Barbina, EY's US Geostrategy leader, and we welcome you. And Rhonda, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me, Adam.
There's so much we could talk about, but I wanted to start off saying, this kind of new era of globalization, as we kind of talk about it, is increasingly shaped by policymakers, and that's having a profound impact on business. For life sciences, we've particularly seen that in the post-pandemic environment, with the emergence of industrial policies that seek to reduce global dependencies, changing where businesses can source and inputs in IP, and really where they can manufacture and sell. And I know that's a mouthful, but I wonder, as you've been out with your clients, how would you characterize the environment, and maybe how are your clients thinking about it?
Yes, there's a lot that's happening in our space right now. I would say tectonic shifts in the operating environment as companies are navigating trade policy and geopolitical dynamics. Life sciences is a great space to be in. There's no other sector that's trying to solve for cancer. So, in spite of everything, companies are moving on and trying to figure out, people live longer, healthier lives because of everything that's going on. But the last couple of years, and especially this year, there's been some, I think, major landmark activities that are shaping how this industry is coming up. Most notable of them, as I'm speaking with clients, the things that they are most worried about, one is we are in what's now the second patent cliff. And there's about $300 billion of revenue at risk from, LOEs coming up, and then the more weak pipelines for some of these companies as they're trying to source new innovation, either internally or, more than 50% now comes from acquisitions and alliances and things like that. On top of all this, I think what companies are talking about as I visit my clients, what they are most concerned about is tariffs and trade policy. As you know, very recently there was an executive order on 100% tariffs being imposed on branded and patented pharmaceuticals unless companies are actively investing in manufacturing in the U.S. or participating in the most favored nation pricing or some kind of DTC. So that's something big on companies' minds, and that puts cost pressure. Most favored nation pricing, that's also fairly new, and it really takes the IRA one step forward. And that's another thing. 17 companies for the moment, and we don't know if the list is going to expand, and they're trying to think through. Massive shifts in regulatory policy and, all kinds of changes at the HHS. They have lost about 18% of their workforce, lots of leaders coming and going, new guidelines around vaccines, so companies have to figure out what all that means. And then geopolitics. Geopolitics hasn't been like this in many, many decades, right? There's a focus on nationalism, supply chain fragility, and all that has an impact as well. And then finally, the last thing which we are starting to see easing is capital markets and the investment climate. I think, private equity took a massive dip after pandemic times, and it's starting to come back, but that still has implications at least for the small biotechs. So we should get into all of that.
Yeah, thank you. Well, let's just double click, right? I mean, you mentioned kind of tariffs and MFN, right? And I would just be curious, right, in some of those meetings, how are pharmaceutical and medtech companies reacting, and how are they seeking to preserve value and growth? And then, do you see any opportunities in there too, right? I mean, I think we've seen kind of there's two sides to the coin, right? And so maybe can you just expand on that a little bit?
So this tariff policy is going to incentivize greater domestic production, and we are seeing companies take steps towards that. It will potentially have an impact on smaller biotech firms because the investment thresholds that are required to be successful in this environment is hard on them. And it puts a lot of cost pressure as well, right? This 100% tariff, it has to come from somewhere. So if there's tariffs, then it might have an impact on R&D investments, on headcount at these companies. So companies are trying to figure out, one is how do you defray this? And others are also trying to figure out how do they manage this And in the absence of being able to manage that, where would they take the cost out from?
Yeah, I mean, I take your point on the biotechs, right? And there's a difference between some of the larger companies that may be able to absorb some of these costs and others, right? I also think I was sharing with you recently on a case study working with an executive team, right? They're good operators, right? But helping them kind of come up the curve to deal with this intersection of geopolitics and strategy and operations is a big hurdle, right?
Yeah, Adam, on that, I was just recently with the CEO of a smaller company, and they have manufacturing facilities in India. And now it was never at capacity, but it was always great to have that because of the price differential and all. And now they're wondering with the tariffs, does it even make sense to have those plants? Because if it's not at capacity, and then and in places like India, I believe at one point we were looking at 245% tariffs, right? So then does it even make sense? Should they be selling these sites? How do you do more business with China? Do you or do you not? All these are questions that are on executives' minds.
Yeah, I think you're right. It was China, right, particularly with the 245. But we saw the other numbers in India, right, and this is the key question, right, that clients are certainly dealing with. On that operating model piece, right? I mean, there's kind of both the upsides. There's we're seeing some cost takeout. We can't have this conversation without talking about artificial intelligence. I know there's lots of exciting things going on. You had mentioned kind of a recent client and kind of the breadth of kind of examples that you were seeing there. There's a whole host of kind of geopolitical data localization issues. But let's just focus on the business side for a minute. What are you seeing from kind of the AI space? Both if we think about Gen AI all the way to some of the kind of the new exciting things. Maybe what are your thoughts there?
This is especially dear to my heart because EY just very recently acquired neurosymbolic AI capabilities, and it's first in market, and it's going to be game changing for companies. AI for a long time, companies have looked at it as cost takeout and operational efficiencies. But neurosymbolic AI is going to change the game. It's about how do you design clinical trials with more predictable, risk adjusted results, right? It's about better patient recruitment. It's just going to de risk clinical trials. And also, as the landscape changes and companies are increasingly buying smaller pre commercial assets, most of the value is tied to the lead candidate that's getting ready for launch. So if you're able to launch and steepen the launch curve, that's going to pay back in spades in terms of the premium paid. And neurosymbolic AI is going to change the game there. And Gen AI, agentic, all that is going to continue. But I think one of the challenges I see today is companies are seeing this as siloed initiatives. Every function is doing something and a little something, but it all needs to be stitched together at a higher level and thought about from an enterprise point of view. And it's not just about doing what we do better, it's about doing things differently. So we still have to bridge the gap. And if we don't train our employees to use this better, differently, I don't know we are unleashing the full value and potential here.
Sure, that makes sense. And I think that really connects into, probably the last topic that I wanted to bring up, right, which is around transformation and kind of, transactions and I think what we at EY Parthenon call enterprise reimagined, right? How are you seeing kind of everything that we've talked about, right? There's kind of a short-term, medium-term, long-term piece. But as you start to think about the long-term piece and kind of maybe some of the bigger strategic impacts, are there any, specific categories that you would talk about in terms of, we've already talked about kind of tariffs, but like if we think bigger and broader on the strategy front, how do you think about that?
Yeah, so the other big topic we touched on briefly was most favored nation pricing, and that's also forcing companies to do more local manufacturing. Companies are also setting up direct to consumer channels, which I think companies have dabbled in it in the past, but now we'll see more of that. The White House also launched an initiative around that, so we'll see more around those. Ultimately, it's going to be better pricing for patients, higher quality, right? And again, as companies try to fill this innovation gap, we will see what we are seeing already in the market is it used to be more M&A, straight up M&A, because these were commercialized assets and companies had the opportunity then. These were already de-risked. The product was in the market. You knew exactly what it did. But as companies are going farther and farther up on the value chain into the pipeline, and you're buying phase one, phase two assets, there's higher risk in there. So some of the interest has moved away from outright acquisitions to alliances and JVs. So we will see more of that. We are actually seeing more of that. Some of the therapeutic areas are increasingly more attractive right now. Oncology, we knew for the longest time, was really, really hot. So is immunology. Neurology is having another resurgence. And then you can't talk about life sciences without GLP-1s these days. And almost every company is getting into GLP-1s and cardiometabolics more widely. So these are the areas where we are seeing a lot of activity, a lot of alliances and JVs, and companies are really trying to rethink how they do business. I was with a client the other day, and their question was not just, how do they do things better? They were like, could we reimagine our workforce because of all that AI can do and how business is evolving and how, we are looking at onshoring and things like that. So companies are trying to rethink their entire business model, which is our Enterprise Reimagined offering as well.
Ranu, I take your point, right? I mean, these points around kind of alliances and kind of shifting ways that M&A and transformation take place is completely what we're seeing in the market as well. I want to take a moment, right? I mean, we've talked from a U.S. angle, which is obviously has global impacts. You know that my area near and dear to my heart is kind of the geopolitical and the geostrategy aspects of this. So putting you in kind of that shoes, right? What are kind of the three areas of geopolitics that you're seeing? Because clearly we're seeing major global players, whether it's the EU, whether it's China, whether we're India, as you mentioned earlier, and other markets. So how are companies kind of getting their handle on it, and how do you kind of get your handle on it as you think about it for the industry?
Yeah, I mean, and this has changed in the last couple of years, right, Adam? Like we used to be much more open borders, and I think it started a little bit with the pandemic when people couldn't source enough of the materials they needed for saving lives even, and we started to see a shift towards nationalism almost, right? And it's like, prioritizing domestic supplies as opposed to sharing more broadly with the rest of the world. And even one of the tenets of the most favored nation pricing, which is actually thinking about are US patients paying more for the same medication than some of the other comparable markets. What that's doing is one, is the companies have to rethink their pricing strategy in the US. And at least at the moment, some of them are contemplating raising prices elsewhere in the world to try and get to parity with the US market or at least to offset US discounts. So that is one thing that we are seeing, right? Even under the new regulatory regime, we might see US manufacturers might be able to fast track some of the assets that they have. So that's also something we'll be seeing. Um, China, doing business with China may get a little harder with the US Biosecure Act, which was shelved before and it's come back again. 80% of our APIs come from China and India. 88% of US API is imported. So we will see there's going to be some impact. And, as companies traditionally have sourced a lot from China, India, other parts of the world. And under all these new rules, we will see that there's this movement towards nationalism, and companies have to manufacture in their own domiciles. And so we'll see some of that fragmenting as well, rather than like seamless global supply chains. Conflicts. There are so many conflicts around the world now, whether the war in Ukraine or sanctions in Iran. Some of these are disrupting traditional trade routes and access to raw materials. So we are seeing some of that, and all these things ultimately are increasing COGS and generally price to the consumer. So we'll see some of that adjustment as well in the market.
Absolutely right. And I think just from a data point, right? I mean, we saw with our most recent EY CEO outlook, right, that I think it's 3 and 4 companies have implemented some sort of localization tactics in their operating model, and nearly 70% have looked at some aspect of kind of regionalization. So we're seeing this bear out in the numbers. I think it's important to note, right, that these need to be company and sector specific strategies, right? There is no one size kind of fits all model, and I certainly think that's what we're.
Yes, and also like if you are a large biopharma or a large med tech, you are in a better position to adjust for local markets, but some of the smaller biotechs will be more heavily impacted by this. So we might see some retrenching in one market, but a profusion of these in other markets as well.
Yeah. Well, you've heard it here. Complexity is on the table for this, but I think agility, right, and the ability to kind of understand these types of aspects is important. Rana, this was very timely, right? There's so much happening, but as we expect more to come, right? And so look forward to being out with our clients in this space. I want to thank all of you for joining. We know that the life sciences industry will continue to be in the spotlight, and we've explored many areas. So Rana, thank you very much, and thank everyone for joining this latest episode of GeoStrategy in Action. Take care.
Thank you, Adam.